Evening. I'm tempted to say happy Tuesday. We usually do these live chats on Tuesday, but this is kind of a special occasion. We are doing this one on a Wednesday evening or morning, night, afternoon, depending on where you are located. But the reason for the season and the purpose of this particular live chat is to talk all things Alexander Usyk versus Anthony Joshua 2. This is obviously the rematch of the highly anticipated heavyweight clash between former undisputed cruiserweight champion Alexander Usyk, who currently holds the WBA, WBO, and IBF heavyweight belts after beating Anthony Joshua, and of course Anthony Joshua himself, the two-time heavyweight champion, now looking to become the three-time heavyweight champion. Growth through calisthenics in the house. What's going on? Adam Lucas. I'm doing well. How are you? Hope your week is going fantastic. Yeah, this is a pretty big deal. You know, we've been looking forward to this one for a while. Obviously, this was in question for a moment because Alexander Usyk, being a Ukraine native, being a Ukrainian fighter, went back to the Ukraine and was there basically when the invasion by Russia commenced. And so him, like his fellow countrymen and fellow Olympic gold medalist Vasily Lomachenko, they were both out in Ukraine. And we saw recent footage yesterday that Vasily Lomachenko has also entered the United States to pursue his next fight. And it looks like that's going to be against Jermaine Ortiz. So, yeah, that's another fight to look forward to. But, yeah, it was kind of in question whether Alexander Usyk was going to stay put and be and remain a part of the basically the Army Reserve, essentially, for Ukraine, or if he was going to cross the ocean and, or in this case, just cross country lines and enter what ended up being Saudi Arabia to participate in the rematch against Anthony Joshua. So he was the first out of the two between him and Vasily Lomachenko to leave Ukraine to handle his business in the ring. That fight's going to take place on Saturday. And as people trickle in, we're going to start getting into a lot of the different Usyk versus AJ 2 topics that I want to cover. Perdeep Singh, what's going on? He said, this is a great fight. I don't see Joshua able to pull this off. He doesn't have the cardio. And ever since his American debut, his body shrank like a bodybuilder coming off steroids. So, yeah, Anthony Joshua is certainly a, we'll say, bulked up heavyweight, as he's always been. I think his punching power seems to have carried. However, I don't know. Well, his confidence in his power punching, I feel, was lacking in this first fight against Usyk. But when he fights other guys like Kubrat Pulev, he seemed a lot more comfortable sitting down on his power punches. But I get what you're saying. A lot of people have questions about Anthony Joshua, but I feel like a lot of those questions have persisted throughout his career. And we're going to get into some of the reasons I believe why that's the case. EK's in the house. What's going on? Thank you for coming through. But yeah, I think that a lot, and we're going to talk AJ's legacy in this one as well. Adam Lucas asked, what do I think about if Andrew Tate fought Jake Paul? Yeah, no worries. I would favor Andrew Tate, I think, but I would have to look closer at that one to analyze it a bit more deeply. You know, I was going to pick Jake Paul over Hasim Rahman too, just because of the weight cut, and that was before it was called off. Hey, yo, Jay Foreman's in the house. Thank you for coming through. So I want to, first of all, express my my gratitude and really my relief. To be completely honest, I'm actually going to be camping this coming weekend. So I was unsure how I was going to access this fight. I am a DAZN subscriber, but I thought that being out in the mountains and stuff, it was going to be difficult to access a pay-per-view. And if the stream is kind of cutting in and out, I was worried that I would have paid for the money for a pay-per-view fight just to access a stream that was cutting in and out. So the fact that in the US that this is on DAZN and not DAZN pay-per-view, I'm pretty happy about that. I was really relieved to know that just regular DAZN subscribers are going to be able to access this fight, because I was almost sure that they were going to make this one a pay-per-view, because, I mean, we often see Showtime pay-per-view. I mean, it's been PBC who's been called out the most for their excessive pay-per-views, right? Like Andy Ruiz versus Chris Arreola was a pay-per-view. And rightfully so. They've been called out for making a lot of these fights pay-per-view, especially because when PBC entered the game, remember when HBO was dissolving and Mayweather had gone from HBO to from HBO to Showtime, then we started seeing a lot of the championship fights appearing on quote-unquote free TV. We saw fights on, what was it? Was it CBS as well as Fox, or was it always Fox? I don't remember. But the whole mission statement of PBC when they started was to bring the great fights, the A-level fights, to the fight fans who were not paying for the premium channels, basically to democratize elite boxing. That was their initial mission statement. So the fact that PBC got off of that and has been making any really good fight, except for Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano pay-per-views, that's really been the antithesis of what they initially stood for. But yeah, back to AJ versus Usyk 2, or should I say Usyk versus Joshua 2. I am very happy that this is on regular DAZN. I see EK said AJ will start strong, but will start losing confidence once he gets hit with a strong shot. And, in their first fight, he was getting hit with strong shots. Remember, he got wobbled in the third round against Usyk, to where you started hearing the intensity of the broadcast really heighten at that point, because Usyk clearly won the first round and he clearly won the second round. So AJ and then he got hurt. Him being AJ got hurt and wobbled towards the end of the third round. So that is something that AJ cannot afford to do in this rematch. He can't just start falling behind 3-0 in the scorecards in this rematch. EK said, I canceled my DAZN subscription once they started to have pay-per-view. And that is super reasonable, right? Because the point of DAZN was, okay, I'm going to pay this monthly fee, but at least I get whatever laundry list of fights that they will have. Anything from the Josh Warrington fights to if Kell Brooks steps back into the ring. I know he fought on Top Rank or ESPN when he fought Terrence Crawford, but Matchroom has a lot of fighters. Frank Warren has a lot of fighters. So and Golden Boy is DAZN as well. So we thought we were just going to have the whole litany of fights. And to their credit, they have held true to that for 90% of their top tier fights. Obviously, Canelo was the one who crossed the threshold to where if it's a Canelo fight, we could pretty much assume that it's going to be pay-per-view going forward, right? I don't remember if the Avni Yildirim, I think that was still regular DAZN, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then obviously Canelo went over to Showtime to collect that last 168-pound belt against Caleb Plant. Not in the AM. What's going on? Thanks for coming through. Said, I dropped 350 bet on AJ. So you're betting on AJ in this one. I made good money on the first fight with Usyk by decision. Nice. Well played. So what exactly are the odds? I know last time I looked, Usyk was a substantial favorite. But let me know if you've checked the latest odds and let everybody know what those how those odds currently stand. Perdeep Singh says, sucks the Broner fight got canceled. But I like Lipinets. Yeah, I think Lipinets is going to be a tougher fight for Figueroa than Adrian Broner would have been. I was actually picking Figueroa to beat Broner. I would have picked Lipinets, and I am picking Lipinets to beat Figueroa. Perdeep Singh, anyone who has also anyone asked how Usyk trained with the war going on? Did he do his camp in the Ukraine? Because that has got to be a disadvantage. So going into the training camp, I did read people's observations after seeing Usyk saying he doesn't look healthy. That's what they were saying. But then when we see him in these recent sightings, by the way, if you haven't hit the like, please do. Shout out to MAW, who usually like will say that in the thread, and I've seen him do it in the Boxing Wave comments as well, and that's always appreciated. But I've heard everything from Usyk looking unhealthy when he started training camp to obviously how we're seeing him look in these recent couple of weeks. And I don't know if you guys caught today's pretty much sit down and then face off between Anthony Joshua and Usyk. But man, AJ looks like a cool customer right now. Like he's got, I'm picturing how I would feel if I was AJ in this scenario because, and we're gonna get into this, the legacy of Anthony Joshua is hanging in the balance in this upcoming fight. And the fact that he seems so poised in this big moment, because let's be honest, his legacy also hung in the balance in that rematch against Andy Ruiz Jr. People will often forget how high stakes and how pivotal that fight was because a lot of people thought that Andy Ruiz was going to win that rematch because of how that first fight played out. So let's not forget how AJ responded to a high stress situation like that rematch against Andy Ruiz. Let's keep that in mind. Obviously, and granted, Andy Ruiz came in way overweight and underprepared for that rematch. So yes, that did play a role in his lack of performance in the rematch against Anthony Joshua. But again, let's not discredit the fact that Anthony Joshua, his career was kind of on the line in terms of how he would be viewed historically if he lost back-to-back fights against Andy Ruiz and the way that he responded to that. So I'm definitely keeping that performance and that poise in mind heading into this rematch against Usyk. But yeah, in that sit down and face off, Anthony Joshua, he looked very serious. We often see Joshua smiling a lot more than he was smiling today. And that's kind of been his that's sort of been his mood, his demeanor in the weeks leading up to today and in the weeks leading up to this upcoming fight. So Anthony Joshua is pretty much all business right now. And Alexander Usyk he's always scarily intense, right? I think that his face always looks intense. I mean, some people just have a look about them, and I think it's because of his brow ridge, right? He has one of those, if you're an MMA or a UFC fan, Nogueira brow ridge, where it almost looks a little Neanderthalic around the eyebrow to where it intensifies the look in your eyes. Like Usyk always kind of has that, that stare where whether he's like joking around or whether he's dead serious, you still get that glare from Usyk. So Usyk, and I like when he has that Cossack, the Cossack hairstyle where it's just the piece of hair sticking out and then kind of swooping over to the front. I used to wonder back when he was a cruiserweight what that was all about. But if you look up Ukraine Cossack, you will see the Cossack hairstyle, and that is basically a cultural thing that Usyk has been wearing throughout his career. Hot Fast with Robert Reese is in the house. Thanks for coming through. He said, do that stare again. The Usyk stare. It's pretty intense, But yeah, that's a Cossack hairstyle. And, I used to live in I was staying in Monrovia, for a minute. And I was told about what a little bit about the Cossack culture. So it would be an interesting Wikipedia if you check that out. But yeah, that is the origin of that Alexander Usyk hairstyle. So he's keeping it true, and obviously with everything that's going on in the Ukraine right now, he brought that back. Because remember, I think when he fought Tony Bellew, he had kind of like a close crop, nearly shaved head, and then obviously in the first fight against Anthony Joshua, he had a clean shaven head. But yeah, he brought the Cossack hairstyle back. So that was just something that I was curious about early in Usyk's career. I want to get to a couple of your comments before we move on. He said, EK said, what's going on, EK? Said, I saw Usyk versus Beterbiev, their fight in the amateurs. Beterbiev dropped him with a body shot. So they fought multiple times in the amateurs. And yes, Beterbiev did beat Usyk in one of those fights. And yes, and I think you had actually commented before about Beterbiev dropping Usyk to the body. Yeah, that could be. I think that that's an essential ingredient for AJ to win this fight. He's got to sustain that body attack. Usyk's 35 years old. Not that that's old by heavyweight standards, but if you are going to outweigh the guy by 20 pounds, make physicality a factor. Beat him up to the body. But yeah, Beterbiev did have a win against Usyk, but Usyk actually had more wins over Beterbiev in the amateur. So it cut both ways. But you're right. When Usyk did get dropped, he got dropped to the body. Let's see. EK said I signed up for DAZN because they have Canelo, and Canelo versus Bivol was the first pay-per-view for DAZN. Yeah, you're right about that. You know, I signed up for DAZN on the night, or I should say day, because it was a UK fight of Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Povetkin. That was the day that I subscribed to DAZN, and I was glad I did, man. And that's another thing, and we're going to cover that. AJ got bloodied up early against Povetkin, and sometimes I don't think Anthony Joshua gets enough credit for being able to adapt. I mean, obviously, you know, Usyk has a reputation of being the great chess player in the game of boxing, right? Along with other sweet scientists like, you know, Floyd Mayweather. Today, it would be Devin Haney, Vasily Lomachenko. You have your sweet science operators. But again, I don't think Anthony Joshua gets enough credit for some of the adaptations that he's made. I mean, also remember, he got dropped, I believe, in the 5th or 6th round against Vladimir Klitschko, and then he got up off the canvas, ended up stopping Klitschko in the late rounds there. So, granted, I don't think that he's as adaptable as Alexander Usyk, but he does make adjustments. He just didn't seem to make the adjustments, or we should say effective adjustments against Usyk in their first fight. Med Sports TV, what's going on? Thank you for coming through. He said, I got Usyk by 10th round knockout. Wow, okay, yeah, 10th round stoppage of Anthony Joshua. I see, let's see. Hot Fast with Robert Reed said Joshua needs to push in, walk down, and cut off. Basically, cut off the ring. That's his only chance. You're right. He has to be a stalker, but you're right. He can't make this look like a sparring session, right? He can't let this fall into the flow of a chess match where it's like, I'm gonna watch what you do and let's see what I do, jab, jab, and let's see if we can figure this out. He can't make this look like a slap boxing exhibition. You know, Anthony Joshua cannot afford to do that. He did that in the first fight, and he again fell back 3 rounds to 0 to where it was like, okay, you got to really pick up the intensity, which Anthony Joshua did. The 4th round was a swing round. I thought Anthony Joshua arguably, these were some swing rounds. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, up until I think the 9th round. Could have gone either way. And then Usyk, obviously, from the 10th round on, pretty much stole the show and took over from there. So I want to, again, Anthony Joshua is striving to become a 3-time champion, which... Let's get into the stakes of this fight, because this is historical. When you look at the timeline of heavyweight boxing, and we'll start with like the Ali era, because a lot of people don't like, in future videos, we could talk, we'll call it ancient heavyweight history, where you're talking Joe Louis, all the Max Schmelings, and then Floyd Patterson was Sonny Liston's predecessor. So it went from Floyd Patterson. Before Floyd Patterson, it was Archie Moore. After Floyd Patterson, it was Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston knocked Floyd Patterson out twice, and then Ali obviously stopped Sonny Liston. And then from Ali, the Ali era, you had Joe Frazier becoming champion, then Foreman, then back to Ali, and then Ken Norton had his moment. Ali then beat him again, and then Leon Spinks. And then Ali, I think, beat Spinks after that. But ultimately, it became the Larry Holmes era. So Larry Holmes is probably the most underrated heavyweight in boxing history, if not maybe Ezra Charles. If you guys are up on your like ancient heavyweight boxing history, Ezra Charles is another vastly underrated, heavyweight boxer. Jack Johnson kind of gets his due, but he was obviously a predecessor to even Joe Louis. But you had the Larry Holmes era that was the end of the 70s into the mid 80s, and then you basically had the Mike Tyson era. Yes, the belt did swing a little bit because it was Michael Spinks who would end the reign of Larry Holmes, but then after Michael Spinks, you had Mike Tyson, even though Mike Tyson earned his first share of the title, beating Trevor Berbick. So Tyson beat Berbick, but unified against Michael Spinks, knocked him out in the first round. That's a classic. Go rewatch that one on YouTube. The entrance, everything is just menacing. Tyson entered the ring it wasn't even entrance music. It was just the sounds of chains dragging. And it was just ominous. Tyson very stripped down, basically just had his, black shorts, black shoes, and it was just chains dragging was his entrance music for the fight against Michael Spinks, the title unification fight. And check this out. A lot of people don't remember this, but you know who basically the ring master was when obviously you had Muhammad Ali, who I believe was in the ring. When they were announcing their honorary guests. I don't think it was Michael Buffer, but it might have been. It was either Michael Buffer or Jimmy Lennon Sr. I don't even think it would have been Jimmy Lennon Jr. But they were honoring the different people before the Tyson versus Spinks fight started. And before they shouted out any of the legends who were either ringside or in the ring, like again, Muhammad Ali, this is post-Parkinson's, so he was already very slowed down. Donald Trump was in the house. This was actually in one of the Trump Plaza is the main banner that read above the ring. Just a little bit of history. But Trump, in true Trump fashion, started pointing at himself when they announced, hey, before we honor all these other guests, let's honor blah, 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 blah. Donald Trump. He did the two thumbs pointing at himself. But yeah, Tyson versus Spinks, that's worth a rewatch. And then obviously from Tyson, you had you had Buster Douglas and then Evander Holyfield, then to Riddick Bowe, Michael Moore, back to Holyfield and so forth, right? But this is a historically significant fight between Usyk and Anthony Joshua. And granted, the elephant in the room, Tyson Fury, right? The WBC champion, the lineal champion, which some will argue matters more than anything else. But Anthony Joshua is striving to become a 3-time champion. But legacy-wise, let's talk about Anthony Joshua for a moment, because he came in to the professional ranks as an Olympic gold medalist. That in itself carries a certain amount of esteem with it. Muhammad Ali was a Olympic gold medalist, although I think he was a light heavyweight. Ali actually won the gold, I believe, at light heavyweight. Gold medalist, as was George Foreman, Olympic gold medalist. If you want a deep dive into history, Theophilo Stevenson, who was supposed to eventually have a super fight with Muhammad Ali, but because of the politics between the U.S. and Cuba, Theophilo Stevenson never had a professional boxing career. But I think he might have actually been a 2-time heavyweight Olympic gold medalist. Go look up Theophilo Stevenson. He's basically one of the greatest heavyweights that most people have never even heard about. But yeah, this is a historically significant fight between Usyk and AJ in this rematch because, again, AJ is striving to become a 3-time champion. And again, AJ, Olympic gold medalist, Usyk, an Olympic gold medalist, right? But Joshua, he was kind of anointed before he even won a championship, right? And most skeptics, which, I mean, if we're going to talk, sort of the way that a lot of the U.S. boxing fans perceive some of the U.K. prospects, and it cuts both ways, I think, in terms of perception. But a lot of people, and if you're from the UK, you could probably speak to this better than I can, but I'll give the U.S., the general U.S. perspective. There were a lot of skeptics about Anthony Joshua's ability to rise to the highest ranks in the heavyweight division, basically because usually when somebody comes in and they look like they could be as much a model as a fighter or like an actor or somebody who's more used to taking pictures than they are to actually fighting, you will get a lot of skeptics Think Oscar De La Hoya, even though he was the golden boy, another Olympic gold medalist. Muhammad Ali, then Cassius Clay. A lot of people didn't think that he was going to be the real deal because he was basically, for lack of a better term, a good-looking boxer. Usually when you think baddest man on the planet, you expect somebody to have just a ton of scar tissue to basically look the part, right? There are exceptions. Those exceptions, again, being, Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, right? And Anthony Joshua. So Joshua comes up looking like an action figure, like a He-Man action figure from the 80s or something. And most people are looking at him like, yeah, get real. There's no way that this guy's going to have cardio. There's no way that he's going to be able to absorb punches. There's no way that he's going to be able to get into just a disgustingly grueling fight and be able to persist like the greats of the past, right? You watch a fight like even recently, well, relatively recently, take Lennox Lewis's final pro fight against, yeah, you're right, EK, Sugar Ray Robinson too. You take Lennox Lewis's last pro fight against Vitaly Klitschko, Vladimir's brother. A lot of people wouldn't have believed or don't believe that Anthony Joshua has the intestinal fortitude, the guts basically, to persist in a difficult fight like that, right? So those are some of the suspicions that people have when you see a guy who looks like Anthony Joshua coming in and rising, rising in the ranks, aspiring to become champion. And then obviously he had like Eddie Hearn, who was like his chief advocate. A lot of people forget Eddie Hearn's first like champion, his first like premier fighter that kind of set Matchroom ablaze was Kell Brook, even before Anthony Joshua. Early Anthony Joshua was fighting on Kell Brook undercards. So a lot of people were skeptical about Anthony Joshua. He started rising up the ranks, started beating better and better fighters. Some of them included Kevin Johnson, who was a credible fighter. He beat Gary Cornish. Some might not remember, but Gary Cornish was a credible opponent. He fought Dillian White, and they were kind of early rivals. This is before Dillian White beat Joseph Parker. This is obviously before the two fights against Alexander Povetkin. This is before Dillian White started fighting Derek Chisora those two times. At least I think it was. And it was before Dillian White fought Carlos Takam. So Anthony Joshua then knocked out Dillian White after having some issues early in that fight. So it's like, damn, Anthony Joshua might be for real. You start seeing his quality of opponent start getting better and better. And then he fights Charles Martin, where, we had seen in the U.S., we had seen Charles Martin fight a few times, not against anybody really meaningful, but he was like a belt holder. And sometimes if you're watching a lot of like HBO boxing, this, a few years back in the day, you would see a lot of fighters like Robert Easter, Jared Hurd, Daniel Jacobs, different fighters fighting guys who are clearly not as talented naturally as they are and starting to earn wins. And then you end up seeing them with a belt in their hand. Charles Martin kind of followed that path to earning a title, but he was a belt holder, and that was the first guy that Anthony Joshua beat to earn a share of the heavyweight crown. So that Charles Martin was the IBF champion. So the fashion in which Anthony Joshua knocked Charles Martin out, that really did have a lot of people saying, damn. So not only is Anthony Joshua a power puncher, which we knew that he hit hard, that was like the first thing that was evident to anybody watching AJ, but it was like, okay, so he's got the timing and the punch placement. He's got the poise to be able to set up the power punches in a sophisticated way, right? And then he fights Dominic Breazeale, Eric Molina, though, knocks them both out. So this is when Anthony Joshua was still knocking out every single one of his professional opponents, right? Remember when both him and Deontay Wilder had a 100% knockout percentage? All of their fights resulted in knockout. So then he fought Vladimir Klitschko, and that was kind of the king-making performance for Anthony Joshua, right? It made him a made man in the sport by stopping the former, heavyweight dominator, Vladimir Klitschko. So that quieted all the skeptics, right? Because if there was a remaining, a lingering doubt about Anthony Joshua, it was, can he handle a difficult fight? Well, he got dropped against Vladimir Klitschko. After dropping Vladimir Klitschko, right? They traded knockdowns within like a round of each other. He stopped Vladimir Klitschko in the late rounds. Remember that uppercut that he hit Klitschko with, and then he TKO'd him in the, I think it was the 11th round. After that, he started defending the title. Carlos Takam, then he unified against Joseph Parker. A lot of people really wanted to see that fight. And if we're going to talk about the best opponents that AJ has beaten, I would start at Vladimir Klitschko. I still see that as being his greatest win. And then I would say Joseph Parker right behind that. No, it wasn't a scintillating fight. It wasn't a sensational knockout, nothing like that. In fact, it was kind of it was sort of a little bit of a snoozer. And I think a lot of that was because of the officiating. They didn't let, the referee didn't allow for a ton of inside fighting. So Anthony Joshua beats Joseph Parker via decision because remember, Joseph Parker beat Andy Ruiz Jr. Joseph Parker for a long time was the only guy to have beaten Ruiz. He beat Ruiz for a share of the title, and then AJ collected that against Parker. And then he fought Alexander Povetkin, and then he fought Andy Ruiz Jr. So that Povetkin fight, remember the difficulty that Anthony Joshua sustained early in those rounds where he got bloodied up. And, you know, Alexander Povetkin, even when he started aging into his late 30s, he was still super dangerous. If you want to talk about somebody who's able to set up a one-shot kill, I don't know if you guys remember Mikey Perez, but look at Alexander Povetkin's knockout of Perez. Alexander Povetkin, an Olympic gold medalist himself, is able to set up the power punches because he stays pretty low and he jabs high and low, so he starts getting the opponent guessing, and then that's when he's able to unleash an overhand right or something like that that could just end the whole night. Anthony Joshua had to navigate through those difficult waters, ended up stopping Povetkin in the 7th round. So by this point, Anthony Joshua has more or less proven his point, right? And then he was supposed to fight Big Baby Miller, and then Big Baby Miller tested positive for PEDs. Not the last time that he would do that. And then Andy Ruiz was the late replacement and then pulled off the extraordinary upset. Now, we knew if we were paying attention to the heavyweight division that